Ladies and, well, ladies. We're talking business. Ladies' business. No, not that ladies' business. Ladies in business. Especially tradie business. Whether you're a CEO, self-employed, working for someone or supporting someone else in theirs, this is a podcast about ladies in tradie businesses. Join your host, Nick Cox, one half of Tradies in Business and the Tradiepreneur program, as she interviews inspirational, everyday, motivational and extraordinary women from all industries and walks of life about what it takes to be a truly successful, modern lady in business.
Well, hello, ladies, and welcome to the Ladies in Business podcast. I am here today with one of our amazing tradie wives. I think I introduced you to the concept of speaking with some of our amazing members right back in our first very mini, tiny, minuscule episode that I did, introducing the concept of the podcast to you all. And we have the first of those today. I'm very kindly joined by Ash Wheeler from Beau and Co Construction, but that's not the only place that Ash shows up. Ash actually has her very own business as well as helping out and managing Beau and Co Construction. She also has another business called Northeast Ear Care. Oh, wow, I nailed that. I really thought I'd stuff it up. Welcome, Ash. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Nick, for having me.
You are most welcome. Thank you for making the time. It's pretty awesome to think that you can make some time when you're running two businesses and you have two children and you have a busy life independent of all of that as well. Ash, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am an audiologist, and I guess I would say I was an audiologist before I was a lady in construction or a lady tradie. We moved to the country from Melbourne about 8 years ago for a job that I got fresh out of uni as an audiologist, and we promised to stay in country Victoria for 2 years, and that was 8 years ago. We never left, and I worked for a boss for the 7 or 8 years, and then I got courageous and opened my own business where I've really cornered a niche, an area that's not very well serviced in regional Victoria, and that's where I am with Northeast Ear Care. But probably more relevant today is about Beau and Co Construction, which is my husband and my business, and that's taken a little while to get used to that idea. It had always just been Beau's business, and I first started out helping out with the books. I know there's many women out there that would say that they just help out here and there. And that's kind of evolved over time as the business has grown, as we've, got some pretty lofty goals in our sights, and that's meant that I've needed to be a little bit more hands-on. And so now I probably call myself Beau and Co Construction Business Manager, not just dabbling in a bit of bookkeeping. So between all of those things, plus having two little kids, life's busy, but it's good.
Life's busy is an understatement. I really want to touch on something straight up there because I actually mentioned it myself in the intro episode. I fell into what I then called my husband's business the same way by doing the bookwork. And I didn't even do the bookwork. I just did data entry. I didn't do the reconciliation or the PAYG or the BAS or any of that stuff. I hated it. I still hate it now. I still don't even do it for tradies in business. I think it's a typical journey for us as tradie wives. Our husbands or our partners often find themselves at a crossroads where they either go off and continue to subcontract to somebody or continue to work on wages, or they look at the possibility of starting their own business, then they're drowning before they know it because there's just so much more involved than any of us have ever thought of. Yeah. And us as the helpers, as we so often are as the tradie partners, put our hands up and say, well, why don't I give you a bit of a hand and we'll start with the bookwork and see how we go from there. Ash, did you have any experience with the bookwork prior to helping Beau out in the beginning when that's what you were doing?
No. So my training was from, funnily enough, Beau's mum. So way back, 10 years ago, Beau's mum was doing his books, paper and pen in like an exercise book, wow, writing out the ledger and tallying up all the receipts. And I kind of inherited that when we moved in together. And I said, I'm happy to do that for you. At that point, he was just subcontracting just himself. And that evolved into wanting to find a better way because, as we now know, there's plenty of software programs and things, and it was taking up too much time. And my mum was working at an accountant doing bookkeeping, and she introduced me to one of the software packages. So I started using it, and then I would just ring her all the time, be like, Mum, how do I do this? Googling, how do I lodge a BAS, and checking in with the accountant. And then, just with time and experience, I've sort of taught myself with the help of people around me, like my mum who works in the industry. And yeah, I guess it's just sort of evolved to be, you take on a little bit more, I've got my hang of that now, I'll have a go at this, or, the business is evolving, someone's going to have to learn how to do wages for an employee. So, that was then a part of what I was doing too. And what started out to be kind of a couple of hours once a month to lodge a BAS or reconcile bank accounts has turned into quite a few hours a week now.
Like a full-time position there, plus your full-time position in your own business, plus being a mum.
Yeah.
Work. So, Ash, back then in the beginning when you started with the typical bookwork, and I think so many of us do, as we mentioned, what sort of ideas did you have around then taking on other jobs to help with the business? Because at that point in time, it was still very much about helping with Beau's business rather than stepping up to the plate and taking ownership of that company yourself. So what were some of those first other tasks that you took on other than the bookkeeping?
So I guess very initially when Beau decided he wanted to take on an apprentice, sort of finding out, well, okay, how do we employ someone? What information do we need to be doing everything legally and in a fair work way? So researching, what do you pay someone? How do you pay someone? What paperwork do we need? How do you generate a group certificate? And looking back at the time, I was so daunted by the prospect of being responsible for somebody's wages. And now I just think, oh, that is such a small thing in the scheme of things, but it's all relative. At that time, that was a huge step for us to be employing someone. Now we have 5 employees, and all of the complex things that come with that. But yeah, initially it was the staffing, and then it was letting go of the accountant doing the BAS, doing it myself, because it's once you know how, it's not too hard. What else do I do?
You do lots more now.
Yeah, I do now. I'm just trying to think back then. And I guess back then I was not invested in it. It was just like, oh yeah, Beau needs me to do this. And I'll just sit down on a Sunday night and do it. I wasn't really thinking, how can we grow this business, or what's our 5-year plan? Or it was just, Beau just plodding along as a subcontractor. And, when the work was there, it was great. And when it wasn't there, it was a bit annoying, but we weren't really actively doing the things we're doing now to create a successful business.
So what triggered the change? Because obviously, we've been working together for a while now. I have always seen a very motivated couple who are keen on creating not only a good business, but a legacy for their family as well. So that's the way we've always known you. Yet where you're starting from here isn't that same space. It is very much like you're saying, I'll help with the business. What triggered the change in the thinking pattern there for you guys?
I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, we went through a really hard time, and that was probably the catalyst for seeking the help of a business coach or mentor, and really triggered me into stepping up to the plate and having a bit more of an input. Not that Beau never wanted me to, it was just I didn't really see myself as a part of his business. And that was, us women tend to, talk ourselves down a bit maybe sometimes, or not value our contribution. And it was, a really rough patch we went through. We nearly lost everything. And we were heading into Christmas. We were 6 or 8 weeks out from Christmas with not a single job on the radar.
Wow.
With 4 staff to employ. They still need their wages. It's not their fault we didn't have any work.
Yep.
And when I look back at that time, I guess was sort of in the headspace of, well, you just work harder. You know, Beau had always been taught, well, you work hard and the rest will come. You work hard, you'll make money. And he was working hard, but there was not necessarily money growing in the bank account. And when I look back at that time, we owed money to the ATO, we owed money to the bank, we owed money to family. We'd poured our entire personal savings into the business just to keep it afloat, to get us through that Christmas period of having, you know, 3 or 4 employees to pay. We got to the end of that period, and Beau's thinking, well, why don't I just go and get a job at Bunnings, because this is just crap. You know, I'm taking on all the risk of a business, taking on the risk of staff for what? You know, we're about to lose it all. You know, we've got little baby, you know, he's not had a break all year. He's just been working hard. You just feel like a hamster on a wheel. And we started talking about the whole concept of, well, if you continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, to me, that's the definition of insanity, isn't it?
I think so. And yet so many of us do it. I think it's a really common part of the journey. I've been there. I've been in situations where we haven't been able to pay wages and we're drawing down on the mortgage to try and find enough money to pay wages. Or when, you know, I referenced and speak quite freely about my husband having several breakdowns through the stress of running his building company and having to step up and try and figure out what to do from there. It's absolutely the most stressful thing I've ever been through. It's made me physically ill. It clearly made him physically ill. He was in bed for weeks on end. Team members even went down in the same sort of way because we hadn't built the structure to support them through the stress that was obviously passed on from my husband through to the rest of the company. We find ourselves invariably in those positions. And when you look back, you realize, okay, I can see the patterns. I know now that I know what I didn't know then, I can see how I continue to contribute to those mistakes being made time and time again. And I feel now at times that I absolutely felt insane when I was trying to figure out where we were going wrong, what was happening, how to help him in that particular instance, and what to do myself with leading us out of that difficult time. It's really, really challenging. And yet I don't know that I would have thought about looking for a mentor or a coach at that time. For me, for a couple of reasons. There's that fear or that shame that comes when you don't feel like you're meeting those success parameters that you've put in place for yourself. So that for me always got in the way. But then also his fear and shame, because nobody talks about the tough times, and yet we all go through them in business. So, and particularly traders, I think they're really, really bad at it, if I'm allowed to be judgy in that sense. They very much are looking from the outside into other businesses, and they all look successful. I think you and I had a conversation recently about having a nice car, and everyone in town thinks that means that you're doing well in business, but it doesn't mean anything. The bank still owns that car. Or having the perception of a nice house. Well, I still have a huge mortgage that I need to pay off at some point in time so that I actually own that house. There's a perception, and I think other businesses look like that from our tradies' point of view. So they're looking at the other builder down the road and feeling like, well, he's Mr. Super Successful. Why aren't I in that position? But we're not sharing the truth of where our business journey is. And I think traditionally, women are much better at that. And in business, I don't believe that to be true. I think there's so much shame around, or there's the perception of shame. I don't actually think the shame is there, because in my experience, every time I've shared some of the tough stuff I've been through, I've had nothing but overwhelming support and love thrown at me to help me through those times. And yet at the time when we were in the thick of it, I, like everybody else, put my head in the sand, or I ran away, or I didn't share for a couple of reasons. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know where to get support. So I'm really intrigued to understand how you knew that finding a mentor or a coach might be the right way for you guys to go in terms of direction for finding that change.
Well, for us, looking back, I wish it didn't end up the way that it did. And I really hope that whoever might be listening might not make the same mistake that we did. And that was hit rock bottom and then do something. Because we were really, it was kind of like, well, we get a coach or we get a mentor or try and get some help, or that's like, I didn't have another option. I didn't know what else to do. Everything was going down the gurgler, and it was, to sell it to Beau, it was kind of like, well, either way, we might lose everything. We either lose everything by doing nothing or doing the same thing that we're doing now, or we lose everything by paying someone to try and help us.
Yep. But
at least we know we tried.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And I don't know that many people look at it that way. And I get it, because I'm not sure that I would have either. I think another big barrier for many is the financial obligation, obviously, that goes with finding help. Often that becomes too hard. So how did you balance up the risk of actually spending the money to find something that would work for you guys, or not doing anything, like you're saying? Was that a really hard decision to make when it came to the financial implications?
Yeah, it was something that we really had to consider, and something that we were both apprehensive about, because we'd never really paid anyone for business advice before. You pay your accountant or your bookkeeper, or these other professionals, your finance brokers, and all this kind of thing. You pay all of them. But I think in business, it's not, having a business coach or a mentor is not something people talk about. So it's not necessarily something that you think, oh, that's a must-have. Like, you wouldn't start a business without an accountant.
Yes.
So, and so people don't think you're crazy if you have an accountant, because of course that's necessary for business. And so we started thinking about, and one way that I talked to Beau about it was that he's a carpenter. He's a great carpenter. He is he amazes me with what he can do. Like, I have no idea how he does half the stuff he does, and I have, massive amount of respect for what he does. But when you're at trade school, or when you're doing an apprenticeship, or even when you're a qualified carpenter, nobody's telling you how to build a business or run a business, or what do smart business people do. And it was only because we made mistakes that we thought, oh, well, yeah, that's what you don't do. Yeah. So, okay, we've ticked that box. We know what we don't do. Okay, what should we do? And I feel like this path has been tread by so many before us that it seems silly not to just go ahead and ask the people that know. And yeah, that's going to cost money, but just like, Beau's clients pay him. He's the expert in being a carpenter. So yeah, of course he's going to ask them to pay for that advice or pay for that job. So when we're thinking about getting advice from a different kind of an expert, well, you have to expect to pay for it. And we kind of rationalized it down to, like, what's it going to cost per week? Maybe we'll give up this or that, or maybe we'll, just try and make it work for a few months. And if we're not seeing benefits or we're not learning anything, then we would reassess. But at that point, we really had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
We'd come so close to losing it all, and the amount of stress that it was putting on Beau and me, it was really worrying. So it was kind of like a last-ditch attempt to save our business. And I'm really glad that we did make that decision, but I really hope that others don't get to that point before they realise that maybe we don't all know how to run businesses, and there's so much to learn.
I think we lose sight really quickly of the fact we spend 4 years typically learning our trade, and we spend no time learning our business. And if we were to put in even half of those 4 years, 2 years into learning our business, alongside performing our trade, it can make a huge difference to the stress levels and the overwhelm that so many of us face. And I too, like you, wish it was something that was taught, and we're doing as much as we can to try and support some of those changes, right down to, parts of our business. Some of our business team actually sit on government boards to try and change the training packages around, in particular, in this case, Certificate 4 in Building and Construction, Australia-wide, to try and impact some change so that we are collectively given more information right at the very beginning. So it's not when you get to your position like you were talking about, or finding myself in a very similar position, that we actually then look at what change is available or what assistance is there to help us. Ash, when you knew that it was time for a coach or a mentor, was Beau on board with that idea, or was that something that you really needed to take some time to work through with him as well, so that he was open to being vulnerable?
Yeah, we did have to talk about it a bit. I think he's not alone in this. It's difficult to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's about it's your brainchild, your business, it's what you've built. Like, you don't want to admit that maybe it's not perfect. Everyone's driving around in their new Hiluxes pretending everything's okay. And I'm sure we're not the only ones that have been in that position. So I guess just encouraging him to be vulnerable and encouraging him that, well, obviously this business that is doing coaching and, trying to help trade business owners, that we're not the only ones that they've contacted, or that, we're not their only clients potentially. There's going to be a list of people who are using their services. So there's obviously, there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And, if we learn something, that'll be great. And, if we don't learn anything, or we feel like it's not, it's not worth it, well, then, we change our bank accounts and we never talk to them again.
I love that. There's always an exit strategy.
Yeah, we had an exit strategy, but he certainly wasn't like, yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
And I think he maybe, you don't know what you don't know, as you say. Like, he didn't know what we didn't, or he didn't know what we necessarily needed to work on, or what small things could make such a huge change to a business.
All right, let's talk about your evolution in that business, Ash, going from helping out. Nobody can see my air quotes, but I'm doing big air quotes every time I say helping out. Going from helping out in the business to being the business manager. Like, that's a huge transition, both internally, so the way our internal dialogue works, the way we think about our role, the way we think about our value. That's a massive change from just helping out to being the business manager. How did that even happen?
It was very much stimulated by my interactions with Traders in Business and the other women that I've met within that group. So I feel like my story is certainly not isolated as far as being, the spouse of a trade business owner who helps out, air quotes, and it wasn't until I started actually thinking about the tasks that I do and how those tasks are things that Beau would not have the foggiest idea how to do. He hasn't taught me how to do these things. I've worked it out. I know how to do it. I've got the systems and processes in place to make sure they get done. I'm making sure the ball doesn't get dropped on them. And that is worthy of A title, and B, getting paid for it.
Hell yeah.
I'm a bit sad to say that I only started getting paid by Beau and Co Construction about 3 or 4 months ago.
I don't think you should be sad. I think you should celebrate that you are now being paid by Beau and Co Constructions for the work that you do. It is valued. It is a very important part of your company. And I think that you're very much responsible for the way the whole company has evolved in a short period of time through your own ability to be vulnerable and lead the way for Beau to be able to then also get comfortable with his vulnerability.
Yeah.
So you could make some of those changes. I think you guys have had a huge turnaround in a very small period of time.
Yeah, and he is not that he ever didn't know what I did. He's always known that my contribution is valuable. But I think since we've been going to the Traders in Businesses meetings and talking openly about our goals and things, he's actually said to me on a number of occasions, this business would be nothing without you. He said, I really do appreciate everything you do, and I now see the volume of what you do and just how I'm constantly kind of thinking about ways to improve, improve the workplace for our employees, or, projects that we can be aiming for, or ways that the business can improve. And Beau's doing that too. And I feel like we're both kind of coming from different angles with those sorts of ideas, and both of us together just make a really great team. He's coming from like the practical chippy side of it, and I'm coming from the admin sort of management, employee relations, I guess, side of it. And between the two of us, I feel like we've had some really awesome ideas together that have really changed the way that the business is operating.
I totally 100% agree. I could sing your praises all day long. How do you make it work, Ash? Like, how do you do it all? You've got a lot on your plate. You're running two businesses, not just one, but two. You've got two very young children. How do you fit it all in?
It's a great question. And it wasn't until I started thinking about my bio, I guess, for coming on the podcast that I thought, yeah, right. That's why I'm so exhausted. I need at least another 2 days in the week. That'd be great.
Wouldn't it?
But yeah, it is a balance. I work part-time physically with clients in my audiology business, and a little bit from home as well. And I try and squeeze in some work for Beau and Co when I'm in my clinic in between patients. You might find me doing the pays for Beau and Co in between patients, or you might find me bringing suppliers or on my lunch break at my audiology clinic. So it's sort of straddling. I don't have defined hours for both businesses. They kind of all gets done together, but I try and, when I'm at home, be really present and try and cram as much work as I can into my allocated work hours, and then be really present when I'm home with the kids, because we've got an almost 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
They're so little still. They still like you and want you and need you at 4 and almost 1, whereas mine as adults want nothing to do with me, except if they want me to put fuel in the car or take them to get some takeaway or pick them up from the city in the middle of the night on a Friday or a Saturday night. Other than that, they want nothing to do with you anymore. So it's your time of life is particularly busy, and I remember the struggle far too well, unfortunately. Do you get external help? Like, do you have cleaners and things come in and help you so that you've got that time?
No, don't have a cleaner, although that's something that I'm working towards being okay with having.
Yeah.
If you came to my house, you would agree.
That's going on the 90-day plan, Ash. We're going to have a cleaner before.
I have, I call Mount Washmore in my home office.
I have one of those too.
Ever-growing mountain of clean washing and odd socks. But I try not to sweat that small stuff, and not put too much pressure on myself to have the perfect display home and, the perfect family, and just try and do what I can each day. I have heaps of help from family, as far as my mum is quite local to us, so is my sister. So we call on them a lot to help us with the kids, pick up and drop off, or if the kids, today, for example, my 1-year-old Murphy, he's unwell, can't go to daycare, so my mum's offered to have him so that I can still come to work, because being self-employed, if we don't go to work, we don't necessarily get paid. So it's really nice to have that family support to help with the kids. No doubt about that at all.
Absolutely. Do you get any time for yourself, just for you, Ash, to be Ash?
Not as much as I would like. That's also something that I'd like to work on going forward. I have hobbies. I love to sew. I love to crochet. I love to bake. I love to go out with the girls and have a drink. These are all things that I know I'll get back to. But it's when you're in the middle of two businesses within growth phases and two small kids, it's kind of on the back burner, but it's something I don't want to lose sight of.
Fantastic. Putting that on the 90-day plan too.
Yeah.
Pulling your homework out of the podcast episode today.
Yes, and you will definitely hold me accountable for that.
Absolutely will. Okay, Ash, what have been the biggest changes in the business in the last, let's say, 6 months? What's your focus been, and what's really shifted and changed for the two of you?
Probably number one would be a fundamental change in mindset.
Mm.
So Beau no longer sees himself as a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
He sees himself as a business owner.
Nice.
And for me, I have seen a massive change in the way he talks to other people about his business, whether that is suppliers, whether that's his employees, whether that is the supervisors for the builders that we work for.
Mm-hmm.
He's advocating for us as a business owner. So, you know, that means not doing too many favours that cost us too much money.
Oh,
yeah. Not accepting, you know, when someone agrees to pay you something and then they don't want to pay it. You know, in the past you might not have followed that up, but you know, now he's really got that business owner hat on rather than carpenter hat, which I'm really proud of him about that. And that is really reflective in our balance sheet. We're chasing better quality clients. Beau's working on getting his builder's license so that we can have our own private jobs and not do so much work for other builders. These are all things that 12 months ago, if someone had said to me, oh, you guys will be doing this in 12 months, I would have just laughed at you.
Wow.
I think Beau actually said the other day that he has never spent so much time away from work whilst still having money coming in.
Wow. That's exciting.
So there's been a few times where he's said, you know what, I'm going to have a long weekend.
Yes.
You know, we've started offering the boys to have paid long weekends because we've been super busy, as I know a lot of trade businesses have been, and we're asking a lot of our staff and trying to reward them for their efforts. And, you know, so there's been a few occasions where they've had four-day work weeks and we're paying them for a day off, and yet the bank's never looked better. And, you know, Beau is able to stay home and have the kids if they're sick, and it's a day that I need to be in my office. He'll stay home and have the kids. These are all things that would have been so much harder to achieve 6 months ago because we're living day to day or week to week, or as soon as someone was one day late on an invoice, we're all going into panic mode because how are we going to pay the wages?
Yeah.
So it's really removed a lot of stress. And, you know, we're not finished yet. There's still so much to do and we're not perfect and we're still learning. But what the change I've seen in the last 3 to 6 months really excites me for what the change might be in the next 6 to 12 months.
It's incredible. And I wonder then, you know, I think typically if I was listening to you before I knew how big a difference small steps can make in terms of change, I'd be sitting here thinking, well, I don't have time for this. This is going to be too hard. It'll be too much work. Sure, it's work and it's never easy, but was it super hard like you might assume that it would be to make this change?
No, not hard in the way that you might think. I think it's probably good to not look too far ahead.
Yes.
So, you know, if 6 months ago someone had said, oh, you know, in 6 months' time you'll have all of this done, I would have said, no way, I don't have time to be doing that. But just focusing each week on just ticking something off the list, you know, kind of having your priority of what you want to be working on, and just each week just tick something small off the list. And it might just be something as simple as drafting a template email for a new customer. And, you know, these are the types of things we weren't doing before, and it really reflects on the professional vibe of your business to be doing those sorts of things, and they're paying off. Like a simple email, you know, just makes us look so much more professional. Having an email signature, even not something that we even had, and now we're getting comments about how professional we look from clients who are inquiring because of their experience, which is so much different to what it would have been 6 months ago. 6 months ago, it would have been, Beau would have answered the phone and said, oh, yeah, I'll call you back. And he might not have called him back, maybe.
Yep, I'm familiar with the old, oops, I forgot to call them back. I'll do it tomorrow. And it's a week later and it's still not done.
Yeah. So just, little simple steps, just don't bite off more than you can chew, and then you just do something simple each week, and then before you know it, it's 20 weeks down the track and you've got 20 simple things done, and it's not as overwhelming as what you might think.
Absolutely. Small steps create big change. They really do, when taken consistently.
Yep.
What's next, Ash? What's next for you? What's next for Beau and Co? What's next for Northeast Ear Care? Look, I've said that twice now and haven't stuffed it up. I think I need an award.
Good for you. It is a bit of a mouthful. It trips everybody up. Perhaps I should have thought about that before I settled on the name.
No, I love it.
Well, Northeast Ear Care is expanding. I am just a one-lady band, but I am increasing my services to include auditory processing assessments for school-age kids. So this is an area that is incredibly under-resourced in our country. So many kids are having trouble in the classroom, and I think COVID has probably amplified some of these concerns. And so I'll be able to offer assessments for these kids who typically have normal hearing, but the brain isn't able to process sound or make sense of what they're hearing. A lot has to go well in the brain for a child to be able to understand language and to learn how to read. So I've just moved office to a bigger space, to a more modern space, and I'm looking forward to getting into some of that work next year. And for Beau and Co, well, we're on the hunt for more staff because we're so busy, and we're excited for the next few years. We've got some pretty up there goals that I don't even know if we'll achieve, but we'll try. Hopefully we'll be doing more of our own private, bigger projects and saying goodbye to relying on volume builders who don't pay very well.
Hurrah for that. I'm with you every step of that way. The quicker we get you, the better. Ash, it's been fantastic. Thank you. I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and open to sharing today. It helps so many others out there in business understand there's an opportunity for you to move past where you're at right now. No matter what that looks like for you, we all have different ideas of what success is for us in our own businesses and our own lives. And you've done a great job today sharing where you guys have come from and how much has changed with little steps, in the last 6 months or so. So thank you very, very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Anytime. Team, you can find all of Ash's details and her contact details for Beau and Co Construction and Northeast Ear Care in the show notes. And you can also reach out to us via social media. All the handles will be in the show notes there for you today. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Ladies in Business. Got a guest you'd like us to interview? Maybe you have a story to share or some feedback to give. Find us on socials or drop us a message via the Tradies in Business website. Take care of yourself, ladies.